What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 5 most broken builds in part of Exile's 2 new update, The Rise of the Abyssal. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of each setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on, then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it, and then finally we will go over to the passive skill tree, the stats, skill rotations, and even what atlas passive should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. And remember, if you want to track these builds, look up the best items, the skill trees and path of building, then check my links in the description. And before we continue, thanks to Top Up Live, they are a pro website that provides POE2 services like cheap currency, and not only for this game, but many more at extremely cheap prices and much more. They also have hundreds of positive comments on Trustpilot, and this website is really worth a try. So make sure to use my discount code KATE for extra 12% off, and on top of it, you can sign up and get even more discount coupons that can go up to $80 for free, as well as Top Up Live will offer cheap gift cards, CD keys and so much more. So this is truly the all-in-one shop for your gaming needs. This build is super unique because instead of avoiding damage, we are actually embracing it. As the more damage we receive, the faster the enemies will melt. The core of this setup revolves around a unique helmet called the Crown of the Pale King. Without it, the entire concept doesn't work, because this helmet takes every incoming hit and converts it into the Thorns damage, while also triggering effects like the Barbs and the Quill Burst. These not only deal additional retaliation damage, but also give the build that satisfying visual identity. So spikes are erupting, bursts of the barbs are flying out, and enemies are endlessly being punished for trying to hurt you. If you are playing in SSF, then you're going to want to hold off until you find this helmet, but in the trade leagues, it's your absolute top priority. Then another key piece that boosts this build is the warbringer's anvil spade mechanic. Traditionally, one of the biggest hurdles for the tanky builds is the clanky downtime when the armor breaks, by leaving you exposed, but with the anvil spade that entire friction point is removed, so suddenly maintaining stacks of the scavenge plating is effortless. Your defenses will never collapse, and your retaliation damage just keeps working 24/7. So let's take a look at our skill gems. At the center we got the Thorn skin, and we're using both the Thorn skin 1 and the Thorn skin 2, depending on how much spirit you have available. You need to think of the Thorn skin as your retaliation aura. It needs to be up at all times, and your job is to manage the spirit so you can keep it active consistently. If you invested into additional spirit rolls on your gear, then you can stack multiple Thorn skins together, which will feel amazing because you're essentially wrapping yourself in a double coat of spikes. The more uptime, the more damage monsters will deal to themselves by just hitting you. For endurance and survivability, we rely heavily on the magma barrier, which interacts with the charge regulation to keep endurance charges flowing. And while we are speaking about the endurance charges, they're huge here, because they scale your mitigation and by extension your Thorns damage. To complement this, Resonating Shield is an occasional button press that might not feel that flashy, but it's deceptively strong. Hitting it regularly while mapping will keep your endurance charges topped off and make you feel unstoppable. Defensively, your setup revolves around the scavenge plating, magma barrier and resonating shield, which are all linked with supports that extend duration, reduce cooldowns, or even boost armor scaling. And this is where you see how your defense literally becomes offense. The longer your plating and the barriers stay active, the more enemies beat themselves to death by trying to get through. And then on the offensive side, you're not relying solely on retaliation. Skills like the Rapid Assault and the Rake are slotted in to give us active melee presence. These aren't your main damage dealers, but they will keep the pressure up and ensure that the enemies are constantly pulled in your retaliation field. And lastly, for utility skills, we got the Fortifying Cry, which not only keeps you alive but directly scales Thorn, because increased mitigation will equal the stronger retaliation. With a cooldown recovery linked, you can keep this almost permanently. Then Disengage is your emergency tool. It's a quick reposition button that doesn't get used often, but it feels OP in those moments where you need to dodge a telegraphed boss slam. Then now let's take a look at the passive tree. The first cornerstone is the Iron Reflexes, and it's essential. By converting evasion into armor, it takes stats that normally would not scale retaliation and transforms them into fuel for your Thorns. When you're stacking evasion on the rings, amulets and the gauntlet, the Iron Reflexes will take all of that and skyrocket your armor. This result is not just durability, but also raw damage output, since our retaliation values are based on how much armor you can stack. From there we go into the 3 main priorities. The first one is the raw defense. You're picking up clusters for the maximum life, armor scaling and endurance charge generation. These nodes give you the staying power to survive constant hits, which is the lifeblood of a Thorns build. If you're not tanky enough to stay in the thick of a combat, then your retaliation never gets the chance to work. Then the second focus is on retaliation scaling itself. The tree will include several passives that boost reflect damage, increase the effect of Thorns, and synergize with the physical scaling. Unlike crit focus builds that chase multipliers, this one leans into the consistency. Every hit you take will become guaranteed damage output, and that output will multiply into packs where the monsters swing rapidly. And then finally, our last focus is on utility and sustain. Regeneration nodes, block recovery, and the cooldown efficiency are all picked along the way. These will give you fluidity to keep your Warcry's barriers and the Thorn skins active without the downtime. It means that you're never caught waiting for a cooldown to cycle, or left exposed without your defenses. Next up is the gear, and the first rule of gearing is to upgrade your Thorns gear at the start of every level bracket. The Thorns damage doubles at every stage, and if you neglect upgrades, then you will feel yourself falling behind quickly. So stay on top of it, and your damage will always feel smooth. The best in slot shield is the China Box Pillar. This thing takes your retaliation damage to ridiculous heights, especially when paired with a Scavenge plating. If you can get a corrupted version with the Thorns damage, then that's the best in slot. Then your spear does not need to deal DPS directly. Instead, look for modifiers that boost Thorns indirectly, so things like gain percentage of damage as extra damage, and sockets for the Sakaval's Rune of the Sky. Then for boots, the Briar Patch is your target, ideally with 2 sockets and a corruption for the high movement speed. Then the body armor should be in a high armor base, with maximum life and resistances. You can go for spirit rolls if you want, but remember that usually it will cost you a maximum life roll, so the trade-off is up to you. Then for amulet, the solar amulet is best in slot. You want one with another spirit roll, maximum life, percentage increased maximum life, and capped resistances. Then our belt should carry a high physical Thorns roll, a high armor base, maximum life and resistances. Then on gloves and rings you wanna fill it with the life, capped resistances, and ideally evasion to scale armor through the armor reflexes. And then anoint is our last thing. If you are on a budget, then go with defensive reflexes for a cheap block anoint. But if you got more to invest, then the Molten Being is a great mix of offense and defense. And then finally, for pure damage, the anoint called Cook will bring extra punch. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. The rotation is simple, smooth, and incredibly satisfying. You wanna keep the Thorn skin active at all times, because that's your bread and butter and you never want to be caught without it. You'll want to cycle Magma Barrier and the Resonating Shield to keep endurance charges flowing, and then you can drop the Scavenge plating whenever it's ready, because it multiplies your retaliation damage by a huge amount. Then for offense, you weave in Rapid Assaults and the Rake to keep enemies engaged. They're not going to be the star of the show, but they will keep the pressure on the packs and bosses, while your Thorns do the real work. Then use Fortifying Cry on the cooldown for survivability and retaliation scaling, and keep Disengage in your back pocket for emergencies. When you're mapping, the playstyle is almost brainless in the best way, so you charge into the backs, your Thorn skins will trigger, enemies will slam into you, and they will instantly explode from their own damage. In the dense content like Delirium or Legion, it feels incredible, because the more enemies swarm you, the faster the screen clears. And then when it comes to bosses, it's about patience. You're not trying to burst them down in seconds. Instead, you stay alive to keep your defensive layers rolling, and let the bosses bleed themselves dry. With the Crown of the Pale King and the Scavenge plating scaling, they will fall shockingly fast, and you will feel completely godlike the entire time. This build has quickly become one of my most favorite ones, because it manages to combine the speed and the rhythm of a melee combat with the safety and explosiveness of the cold damage scaling. The backbone of this build is the Invoker's Ascendancy, which is absolutely the best fit for any type of player, but especially hardcore. The Meditate skill will allow us to stack an oversized energy shield pull by giving us a massive defensive buffer. Then Lead Me Through the Grace Ascendancy will ramp up our spirit, which we channel directly into the Ghost Dance, Elemental Conflux, Wind Dance, and the Herald of the Ice. These will work in the background for crazy buffs. Then on the damage side, the Ascendancy nodes like I Am the Thunder and I Shall Rage are what pushes the setup from strong to downright godlike. They give us valuable scaling options and ramp up our damage multipliers in ways that feel instantly impactful the moment that you invest into them. With a solid staff in hand, most of your map clearing is completely easy. Then Shattering Palm, Herald of the Ice, and the Frozen Spite will tear through the packs with near effortless speed. When you do encounter tankier rares or the bosses, then we shift into the gears, so you will lean into the Quarterstaff in the combination with the Aeolith Shines to generate power charges and then transition into the charge staff and the Tempest belt, and then let the Ice Strike handle the heavy lifting for the single target burst damage. Sustain is another highlight of this build. Right now you can run both, so Clarity 1 and Clarity 2 simultaneously, and the bonuses will stack. This provides enormous increase to mana regeneration. If you combine this with at least one mana leech affix on your wings and some additional flat mana rolls, then you will never find yourself starved for resources in the middle of combat, so you can basically do crazy amount of damage 24/7. So let's take a look at the skill gems. The Ice Strike itself is the centerpiece. Every swing will convert your melee attack into icy projectiles that fan outward, chilling and freezing enemies on the contact. This gives you the best of both worlds, so deadly single target pressure for bosses and wide screen control for clearing maps. To keep the tempo consistent, the Quarterstaff Strike will play a vital role. It fuels your charge generation and allows you to maintain a smooth rhythm of attacks. When paired with the lich chimes, the Quarterstaff Strikes ensures that you're always primed to unleash the charge staff, or combine it with the Tempest belt if the moment calls for it. The Shattering Palm then joins the setup as an additional cold damage source. It keeps the pressure on the enemies between Ice Strike volleys, and synergizes beautifully with the freeze mechanics by stacking damage while locking down the targets. Then Herald of Ice is where this build really shines in the term of clearing speed. Every time you shatter a frozen enemy, the Herald of Ice will trigger a cascade of icy explosions that spread across the entire packs. This means that Ice Strike does not just kill the first enemy it touches, it actually sets off a chain of reactions that wipe the screen in seconds. Then Meditate keeps your mana stable and smooths out the cooldowns, so you never feel locked out of your rotation. Then Elemental Conflux will spike your elemental damage across the board by amplifying your cold output to levels that can shred even endgame bosses. And then Ghost Dance provides a layer of survivability that doubles as mobility by giving you the freedom to reposition quickly, dodge telegraph attacks, and keep yourself alive when fights get messy. I also want to point out that the Lich Chime is not negotiable here. Without it, the build loses its seamless charge generation, and the combat rhythm will feel clunky. And on top of it, just as critical, you must also run both, so Clarity 1 and Clarity 2 together. These bonuses will stack by allowing you to stay in the thick of a combat 24/7. Then next up we have the passive tree, and for the Ice Strike Invoker it's deliberately structured to maximize cold scaling while stacking enough defensive mechanics to make even hardcore progression viable. The first and most obvious focus is on the cold specialization. You want to prioritize nodes that increase cold damage, penetration and the freeze chance. This gives your Ice Strike the power to both shred through the enemies and control them at the same time. Freezing enemies is one of the strongest defensive mechanics available, and this build really weaponizes it fully. Then our second focus is on the aerial scaling. Ice Strike projectiles and the Herald of Ice explosions both will benefit massively from increased AoV, so by investing into these nodes, you don't just deal more damage, you actually cover more ground with every attack, which makes your clear faster and more consistent. This is a crucial part of what makes this build feel so smooth to play. Then mana efficiency is another important choice, because we spam the Ice Strike constantly, so we want to go through the nodes that give us mana recovery and sustain nodes, and this is boosted by the charge generation and crit scaling, which both synergizes beautifully with Invoker's Ascendancy. Overall, with these investments, the build bursts feel reliable, not streaky, and your resource engine never falters. And then defensively, the passive tree leans heavily into the Ghost Dance synergy, so you build layers of evasion, dodge and energy shield recovery that allow us to avoid, mitigate and recover from incoming damage. Frozen enemies combined with the evasion-based passives will create a defensive loop, where you're both harder to hit and actively reducing the number of enemies. Altogether, this passive tree will achieve the perfect balance, so offensively it implies cold scaling, critical multipliers and AoV, and then defensively we combine evasion, freeze and the shield sustain. The result is a build that feels deadly without ever being squishy, and is perfectly suited for any type of player, but especially hardcore. Next, let's take a look at the gear, and here you just need to follow a very simple rule: stack survivability while also stacking staff-based damage. The first priority is capping your resistances at 75% across the board. Without that, you simply won't survive in the red maps. Once resistances are handled, then you want to focus on the energy shield, life, dexterity, physical damage scaling, evasion and even attack speed. These are the stats that make your build OP, so your main hand weapon should be the Razor Quarterstaff. This is where the bulk of your damage comes from, so invest heavily in increased physical damage rolls, flat cold damage and critical multipliers. From there, your Helmet Ancestral Tiara is the best option, thanks to its energy shield and evasion combination. Then the Falconer's Jacket is the armor of our choice, by offering a balanced package from survivability to the offense. Then the Sakema's sandals will provide the movement speed and resistances that you want on the boots, while the breach and the topaz ring will handle the mana leech, flat mana scaling and defensive bonuses. Then the lunar amulet will offer cold scaling and the crit synergy, making it a natural fit for this setup. Then the grim gloves will stack attack speed and resistances, while ingenuity belt will ensure sustain and defensive stacks. Overall, every piece of this gear plays a role, and while the staff does the heavy lifting, it's the synergy across the rest of the kit that makes the build feel truly unshakable. And finally, don't forget about the anointment, and we wanna go with the bestial skin. It's cost effective, efficient, and works beautifully with the scaling properties of our build. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. Your main loop is simple but endlessly satisfying, so Ice Strike is your core ability. You will be spamming it 24/7, clearing packs, freezing enemies, and laying down steady pressure against bosses. Every strike sends icy projectiles across the battlefield by stacking damage and control at the same time. Then to keep your engine running, you want to weave in the quarterstaff strike. This generates charges that fuel charge staff, ensuring that you always have the burst potential when you want it. Once momentum is rolling, then you drop Shattering Palm into the mix. This is your bursty AoV option, especially potent in boss fights or against highly packed mobs. Then Herald of Ice will run passively, as it transforms your combat into an avalanche of explosions. At this time, you want to focus on chaining freezes into the shatters, and you will watch entire screens vanish in icy detonation. Then, when your mana starts dipping, then Meditate keeps you topped off, with the Elemental Conflicts will spike your damage output during the key phases. And then finally, the Ghost Dance is the last tool in your kit, by letting you reposition, getting the dodge mechanics and staying alive during the most dangerous fights. This setup takes everything that people love about the Lightning Arrow meta build and flips it into the cold-based monster that freezes, shatters, and absolutely demolishes maps at the lightning speed. In patch 0.3, the cold bow skills and the deadeye both received huge buffs, and when you put those two things together, then you will get a build that doesn't just clear screens, it destroys them before enemies even have a chance to move. For map clearing, the Ice Shot is your powerhouse, with the right support gems, the projectile train across the screen, and spreading the chill ground and freezing everything in their path. The monster groups just don't die, they explode in a cascade of shatters and the Herald of the Ice stacks, by leaving nothing behind. And when it's time for bosses, then you bring out the Lightning Rod, the Orb of Storms and the Snipe, while stacking freezing effects that keep them locked down. The fact that you can do both, so clear like a speed demon and take down endgame encounters, makes this build incredibly versatile. So now let's break down the most important skill gems. At its core, we are centering everything around the Ice Shot. This is your main clearing ability, and the bread and butter skill that carries the build. When you fire the Ice Shot, the projectile not only deals direct cold damage, but also creates a chilling ground behind it, which slows enemies and stacks freeze effects across the map. Then the Ice-Staffed arrows are the best perfect secondary skill, by providing additional cold damage while stacking freeze and the blind effects on tougher enemies. This not only boosts your crowd control, but also makes enemies more vulnerable to your other abilities. When you combine the Ice-Staffed arrows with the chilling ground from the Ice Shot, as they're unable to respond before you shatter them. Then the freezing salvo is where the things get spicy. This skill adds a huge cold projectile damage and is perfect for both AoV and single target scenarios. Supported by the Hourglass for the cooldown manipulation and the cold penetration for breaking through the resistances. The freezing salvo ensures that bosses and elite monsters can hide behind high defenses. When you drop this on top of a pack, you're guaranteed an icy explosion of the dead. For debuffs, we are running the Frost Bomb. This applies the cold exposure, which makes enemies take significantly more cold damage. With the potent exposure and the magnified aerial support, your Frost Bombs become larger and more consistent source of vulnerability for the enemies. Dropping this before a boss fight will set you up for a massive burst damage. Then Herald of the Ice is where the clear speed really goes over the top. Every time you freeze and shatter an enemy, it causes icy explosions that chain through the pack. Combine that with your Ice Shot chaining, and suddenly every screen turns into a chain reaction of freezing detonations. The Herald is supported with the Overleech, the Cold Attunement and Elemental Armament, which all amplify your scaling and consistency. And then finally, for single target nukes, you will be using the Snipe. This is your big high damage channel skill that absolutely melts bosses in seconds. Next up, moving over to the passive tree, and this is where you really transform the Ice Shot Deadeye into an unstoppable force. The core psychology of the tree is simple: maximize cold damage, maximize projectile scaling, and add enough defenses so you don't get one shot. From the beginning, you will branch into projectile damage, bow attack speed, and the crit multipliers. These are the bread and butter for any bow build, and they make the eye shot scale beautifully. You also want to invest into the clusters that enhance the cold damage specifically, so things like the cold penetration, freeze duration, and the cold exposure. This ensures that not only do you hit hard, but enemies stay frozen long enough for you to capitalize. Then defensively, you're investing into the evasion and life, which naturally synergizes with the ranger's playstyle. With the high evasion, mobility, and the Wind Dancer keystone, you can avoid the majority of incoming damage. The build plays the best when you're constantly moving, so these defenses will line up perfectly with your natural gameplay. Then Javel sockets are another important aspect of the tree. These will give you flexibility, so early on you can grab resistances or mana sustain, and then later you can swap in the pure gems with the projectile multipliers, crit chance, and attack speed. On Javels, your priority should be on mana kill, as it smooths out early sustain problems. Then next up we have gear, which is always a big one, so let's break it down. Your number one priority is your bow. This build scales insanely well with the weapon quality, so the stronger your bow, the better everything feels. Look for a high base DPS bow with an added cold damage, added physical damage, and ideally plus levels to projectile gems. A Gemini base is a fantastic starting point. If you can find a bow with a crit chance as well, then that's where your damage really starts to explode. For your quiver, you wanna focus on the flat damage, attack speed, and projectile modifiers. Then mana on kill is amazing bonus here, by smoothing out sustain early. Then projectile speed also makes the eye shot feel cleaner. Then for your gloves and ring, you should prioritize the flat cold damage, resistances, and attack speed. Rings with the added physical or the cold damage to attacks are especially valuable. Your amulet is a great place to grab levels to bow or projectile gems, as well as critical strike multipliers. Later on, anointing a damage node like the serrated edges can push your damage even further. Then defensively, we focus on high evasion gear for your chest and the boots. Resistances should always be capped at 75%, and movement speed on the boots make the build feel much smoother. The Javels are where you round everything out. You want mana on kill, which is a must-have, and after that prioritize attack speed, cold damage, crit multipliers, and projectile damage. Overall, the gear progression is simple. Upgrade your bow first, then cap resistances and scale evasion, and finally min-max your accessories. And now last but not least, let me show you the gameplay. For clearing, it does not get much simpler than just spamming the ice shot. In the background, the Herald of Ice will handle the chain explosions, and your ice shot projectiles will ricochet through entire packs by freezing everything in their path, so pretty much the screen clears itself. Against bosses, your rotation is slightly more involved, but still very easy to manage. So open by dropping the Frost Bomb to apply the cold exposure, then set up the Orb of Storms and the Lightning Rod to stack on the bosses. Then from there, we combine the ice-tapped arrows and the freezing salvo for the maximum cold damage. Once the boss is frozen or vulnerable, then channel the snipe for a devastating burst, and follow that up with a barrage if needed. This combination absolutely melts even the pinnacle bosses. And now lastly, let's take a look at the leveling. So while grinding, you wanna start out with the lightning and the ice abilities, until the ice shot becomes available at level 9. From there you gradually transition into more cold damages as you unlock the ice tap arrows, freezing salvo, and the Herald of Ice. The leveling process is smooth, because the cold damage will unlock early. This build is a brand new version of the newly buffed grenade skills. Instead of standing still and firing arrows, we are now throwing grenades and detonating them with explosive bolts in split seconds. The core gameplay loop revolves around combining explosive shot with explosive grenade and stacking them into a very high speed, no aim, screen clearing machine. The clear speed is one of the standout strengths for this build. With the right setup, as you can see, you can achieve full screen clears without needing to even aim. Combine this with decent gear for movement speed, and you can hit upwards of 160% movement speed. The key idea here is that you can sprint through the maps throwing out grenades and bolts without ever slowing down, and without suffering the penalties for shooting while moving. On top of it, with a decent investment, we can also one-shot bosses. Explosive grenade in particular will hit like a truck when stacked with the right modifiers and when paired with a rapid shot to preload the extra fire-ass damage, so you can melt pinnacle bosses in seconds. And thanks to our clever gearing and ascendancy synergy, you don't need to even worry about the mana management at all. You can simply throw, explode, and keep moving. So let's take a look at the skill gems. And the build starts with the explosive shot as your main mapping skill. This is the centerpiece of your clearing setup. The way you run it is explosive shot fires projectiles in a wide circular spread, meaning that every pack on your screen gets tagged and detonated instantly. The explosions will chain off each other, and once the Herald of Thunder gets involved, it's just non-stop lightning detonation spreading everywhere. The key to making this feel smooth is the Arjune's Medal, which refills bolts automatically without even needing to reload. This one unique turns explosive shot into a seamless, fire and forget skill that you can spam infinitely. Now, while this is ideal for mapping and clearing, it does not always cut for single target bosses, and that's where our second setup comes in. So you want to get another explosive shot, and this time configure it for single target, and this is where the Nova projectiles will come into play. With the right gear, you can swap into the gem setup before a boss encounter, and shift your character from a screen clearing grenadier into a focused artillery platform. If you're still progressing early on and don't yet have the gear to support the Nova projectiles, then you can just stick with the multi-shot 2 or the Pierce 2 before making this switch. Both of these will work fine while mapping until your upgrades will come online. Then Explosive Grenade is the other half of this equation. This skill provides massive burst damage that you need to nuke bosses or tanky rares. The combo is simple. You throw the grenade, then follow up with the explosive shot, and watch the entire screen get deleted. The synergy between the grenade and the bolt is what gives the build its identity. And then Herald of Thunder is working in the background as a passive source of shock. Every time you detonate enemies with explosive shot or grenade, the Herald Thunder will proc by chaining shock across the maps and adding even more explosions. These constant lightning arcs don't just look flashy, they massively increase your mapping efficiency and add a shock effect for single target bursts. Then on top of it, the called shots will add another layer by auto-casting will take mark every few seconds. This means you're consistently applying shock with the magnitude scaling, by boosting your single target damage and layering in extra explosions during your mapping. You don't have to think about it, it just happens automatically in the background, which works perfectly with our low maintenance build. Then the Rapid Shot is your pre-prep tool. Before a boss fight, you just spam the Rapid Shot to charge up the heat, converting it into a huge boost, so you will get 50% of your fire damage as the extra damage for your next explosive grenade. With this combo, you can preload insane amount of burst before engaging, and to make this burst land reliably, you can slot in the Flash Grenade as your crowd control option. It will stun the boss and keep them locked in place, by giving you this free time to drop the big combo, without ever worrying about dodging mid-cast. Then next, our passive tree is straightforward, but very crucial to unlocking speed and explosiveness of this build. The first decision is to dedicate the grenades to the tree 1 and explosive shot plus the rapid shot to the tree 2. Thanks to the most recent patch that fixed the crossbow weapon tree bug, you can now lock both trees onto a single weapon by checking the box at the top of your crossbow interface. This allows you to seamlessly swap between the grenade skills and the projectile skills without having two weapons. So then, our main path revolves around going and investing into the spray and pray, freedom of the movement and unhindered. These are the most important nodes that transform your build into explosive monster. They remove movement penalties while shooting and stack enormous amount of movement speed. With them, you're able to fire off grenades and bolts while sprinting at a breakneck pace without ever losing movement. This is the foundation of why the build feels so fluid. The main concept of this build is very simple. The faster you move, the more ground you can cover, and the more enemies explode in your wake. These nodes also will get boosted by our helmet, which is called the Constricting Command, which I will explain a bit later in the gear section. Those nodes will give you bonus damage, attack speed and movement speed when surrounded, and with the right setup you can keep those bonuses active almost 24/7. Now let's talk about gear. Your main weapon is the Siege Crossbow. You want to start with a magic base that already has a high increased physical damage, which ideally could be a crucial tier or better. The greater exalts will fill your suffixes, and you can finish it by applying the perfect essence of the haste or the onslaught mod, and the perfect essence of the battle for a +6 roll. Then the helmet is built around Constricting Command. When we get it with a surrounded value of 5, it unlocks all surrounded nodes on the passive tree, which gives us this massive boost to the damage, attack speed and the movement speed. It essentially turns every pack encounter into a personalized buff zone. Currently, the DeFi 2 on this helmet is bugged and will not work with the mana mod, but once that gets fixed, it will completely eliminate any mana issues. Then the body armor should be the new Corsair base. It comes with a 20% reduction to the penalties for attacking while moving. Then for rings, we should focus on stacking as much life as possible, since that's our primary defensive pull alongside evasion, rarity and added flat elemental damage. Then for amulets, we should prioritize rarity and plus the projectile skills. I personally recommend to use the devastation anointment, but this is up to you. Then for boots, we need 35% movement speed. Rich players can chase Essence of Heroes on the boots with corruption for the traditional sockets, which will allow you to slot the Pharaoh's gems for massive speed bonuses. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. The core rotation is simple but incredibly satisfying. So you enter a map and from the very first pack, You're firing your explosive shot into a wide circle. Entire screens will vanish in a single cast, and Herald of Thunder arcs will proc across anything left behind. Also, you don't need to stop to aim or even slow down. You just sprint forward and everything around you detonates. And then, when you encounter tanky rears, you just drop the explosive grenade. Then follow that up immediately with explosive shot. And then watch the enemy disappear in a chain reaction of fire and lightning. And then finally, against bosses, you shift into a more deliberate rotation. So you start with a rapid shot to build the heat and secure that massive 50% fire as the extra damage. Then you throw a flash grenade to stun and lock the boss in a place. And when the window is open, you just unload the explosive grenade, followed by the single target explosive shots from the Nova projectile setup. The result is a devastating burst that can delete bosses in seconds before they have even time to circle through their mechanics. This one is an absolute monster of a build, and what makes it a standout is that this is not your traditional minion army build, where you hide behind a wall of skeletons and zombies while waiting for them to do the work. Instead, this build combines the raw destructive force of the storm magic with the army of the empowered minions, curses and defensive layering that makes you feel like both a commander and a caster at the same time. The campaign experience with this character is incredibly smooth. Early on we use a combination of the flame wall and the skeletal snipers, and then you transition into the raging spirits as your first taste of the proper minion army. By the time that you reach the first interlude, then the build completely evolves into a massive minion army build. These minions don't just add damage, they will shock enemies, debuff resistances, and reduce incoming damage. It's pretty much like a small ecosystem of summons, each one contributing to your survival and the offense in different ways. And then defensively, the Storm Mage build will make the excellent use of energy shield stacking, black chance and the energy shield recovery. You're also able to apply crippling debuffs to the enemies with the curses and exposure, which effectively doubles our defense, since the monsters will spend less time alive to actually hit you. So let's take a look at our skill gems and the transitions that we need to make. Once you transition into the mid and the late game, the build evolves into something entirely different from its early campaign setup. So at round mapping, temporarily summons like the Raging Spirits or the basic Skeletal Snipers will get exchanged for a full roster of powerful and permanent minions. The first and most important shift happens when you gain access to the Powered Zealots, specifically the Spark Casting variant. Binding one of these specters is a massive turning point, because it essentially replaces the need for the Skeletal Snipers. Then the Zealot Spark attack will flood the battlefield with the lightning projectiles, by scaling perfectly with our curses and ascendancy bonuses, and even providing a foundation of consistent and screen-wide coverage. From there, the army grows more specialized. Skeletal clerics will join the lineup, healing your entire minions and enhancing the effect of the master. Then skeletal storm mages become your primary debuffers by applying shock and dramatically increasing the damage that your entire army can deal. You can also combine this with the skeletal brute, whose command skill intimidates enemies, which makes them weaker while amplifying all incoming damage. And then finally, the skeletal frost mage will contribute a vital layer of defense by casting protective ice armor that cuts down the damage that your minions take by almost 50%. By this stage, your gem setup should reflect a mature and synergetic engine. The curses like the elemental weaknesses will not only strip resistances, but also automatically summon spirits by merging utility and the offense into one smooth action. Then a nerd, which served its purpose early, is eventually replaced by the convalescence for sustain. And then when you face pinnacle bosses, projectile acceleration can be swapped for the controlled destruction to squeeze out even more devastating single target bursts. Now let's take a look at our passive tree, which is built to balance attribute requirements, minion scaling, and the energy shield defenses. Early in the campaign, you focus on picking up enough strength, dexterity, and intelligence to meet the gem and the gear requirements. And after that, the rest of the points should be directed into the strength, which naturally increases your survivability. The key early nodes include the growing swarm and the restless dead, which improve your minions' damage, defenses, and revive mechanics by ensuring that they always are present in the combat. The crystalline flesh will later bolster your own durability with additional layers of defenses. Then Profane Commander becomes especially important once you begin running with multiple curses, as it extends the radius of your presence aura, while also granting you additional spirit to summon more minions. Then Relentless Fallen is another crucial cluster, which ramps up your minion damage and their movement speed, making them more aggressive and ensuring faster clear speed. Once you reach the post-campaign and enter mapping, your priorities will shift. The tree expands into heavier investment into the maximum energy shield and recovery nodes, allowing you to sustain far more punishments while continuing to scale the minion damage. Respecs are then expected during this phase, but the padding is clear and easy to follow. Then for amulet instills, the essence infusion is the recommended choice, since it's cheap and grants additional intelligence alongside increased recharge rate. But then later, when your build is more developed, then the warlord leader becomes more premium option, by offering significant power once you can afford it. Next, let's move into the gear. Your early goal is to cap all the resistances and meet attribute requirements. From there, we prioritize items that add levels to all minion skills. A scepter, helmet or amulet with this modifier is invaluable because it passively scales the damage of your entire army. A stoic scepter is fine alternative if you cannot find a rattling scepter. As you move into the endgame, you want to look for gear with increased spirit and the flat spirit bonuses. These will allow you to summon more minions simultaneously, which is a direct multiplier for your damage output. The energy shield becomes your next priority, stacking it across body armor, boots, helmet, gloves and the amulet to form the defensive backbone of the build. And eventually in the late game, you want to transition into using uniques like the Prism Guardian for the block chance, Darkness Enthroned for the socket power, and the Venter's Gamble for the spirit gain from the rings. For offensive scaling, your absolute best modifier is plus levels to all minion skills, followed closely by the spirit modifiers, increased cast speed, and crit chance or the multipliers for your minions. And then for defenses, you want to prioritize cap resistances, maximum energy shield block chance, and even increased energy shield recharge rate. And now lastly, let's see how to actually play this build. Against bosses, you want to begin by pre-buffing your Spectre with the Sigil power and casting elemental weaknesses to chip resistances. You then activate Pen Offering to empower all of your minions, then cast Frost Bomb to apply exposure, and rotate Skeletal Brute and the Skeletal Frost Mage command skills to intimidate enemies and reduce incoming damage. If a fight is really long, then you can refresh it with the Unearth or the Convalescence to maintain the constant pressure. Then in mapping, the rhythm is very fast-paced. Your Spectres and the Skeletal Mages will tear through the packs, while Raging Spirits will fill in the gaps. Every curse cast not only weakens enemies, but spawns more spirits, which makes the gameplay feel like a rolling storm that never runs out of momentum.